things like apples and pears. And as I said before, I mentioned about nectarines and peaches, stone fruit, that flower on 1 and 2nd-year-old growth. The apples and pears, they flower and fruit on 2nd and 3rd-year-old growth, so older growth still. So the important thing with pip fruit, is that you want to encourage that older growth. Because what happens is on the older growth, if you can come a little bit closer, you'll see this is a fairly established apple. Of course, it's dropped all its leaves, but you'll see these little fat buds here. These are called spurs, and what they do is they produce the fruit. So you can see there's a lot of spurs here. It's a fairly older one, but you'll see that's the last year's growth, and then you've got the year before it and the year before it. So it's 1, 2, 3 years growth. So what we do when you get a more mature plant like this is that we can actually thin out some of the spurs, because what you're trying to do with all fruit trees is to get enough light into the fruit to ripen them, and also if there's pollination, then you need to be able to get the bees in there as well. So this is a fairly simple, what we call a single leader apple, or single stem, and as I say, lots of spurs, so you're going to get a lot of fruit on that, ideally. Now this is this is one called Orateur Beauty, and if you have a look on the label, it says it's on a M226 dwarf, which means it's on a dwarfing rootstock. Nowadays they graft or bud onto apples and pears and plums onto dwarfing rootstock, which means they're not so big. Sometimes you used to get huge ones that would just take over your whole garden. So with apples and pears, you really don't need to do a lot. If you've got a good strong structure like this, don't cut them too hard. In fact, they need very little pruning. So apart from shaping, maybe taking some of the lower stems off, the worst thing you can do is prune them hard, get a whole lot of vertical growth, and that will not produce flowers or fruit or flowers. That will just produce a whole lot of leaves. These horizontal branches are the ones that will form your fruit, your spurs. And the other thing is, some people, what they actually do is will tie down branches to make them horizontal, and that's the case with espalier. If you're trying to grow espalier, which is a type where you train them to go up wires or a wall or something like that, where you actually train them, and you might even start with this one here, train it up, and then the next shoot you'll train off that way, so that you cover that wall. So remember, horizontal growth produces fruit, and these spurs produce fruit. So not much pruning required. If you really want to go for dwarf, this one here is a dwarf apple, teacher's pet, and this you can grow in a little container, and you can see where it's been budded there. In fact, they've even still got, the tape here, actually where they grafted it. You can see that they've grafted it there. So it was actually grafted rather than budded. But that's a dwarf apple. So just to summarise, apples, pears, they don't need a lot of pruning. It's just more how you train them, either as a single stem tree or as a espalier, or you can just go for a dwarf that you can put in the pot. Okay, great.